let's create some of our first components. So typically, React is would like you to start looking at the page that you want to create and start thinking in components and say, well, what things in here could be broken up into components, right? Especially if they are components that are going to be reused over and over, right? That are going to be rendered in multiple places. That's a perfect place to put a component. So, for instance, here we have a screen, right, that it's rendering the courses in as a table, and later on we see that it can also render as a grid. So we should already start thinking that, well, maybe we need at least two components. One that renders, notice that both of them render the same data, a collection of courses. Yes. So one component should be able to take a list of courses and render as a table, and another component should be able to take the same exact list of courses and render as a grid. Yes, in two separate components. Make sense? Right? Probably the list of the array of courses should probably live not in any one component, but maybe in the parent component of both of them. Makes sense, right? Some parent should be the owner of the courses, and then maybe pass it to both of them to be rendered. Correct? Right? So let's do that. We'll call this the whole component. We'll call it maybe course manager, the course manager component, and maybe the top level here will have an input field and a button, right? And we'll call that maybe the course manager header or something. And then down below here we'll have the table component, the course table component, and we will also need a course grid component. Okay. All right, so let's start doing that. Let's play around. Let's create our very first component. All right, so to create our components, we're going to create a directory called components, and all our components are going to live in here. Okay. You might want to, depending on how complex they are, they might need dedicated directories, right? Depending how complex they are, right? So in here, let's start off by creating a JavaScript, and we'll call it the course manager component. Okay. So let's create it. So all components are going to have to import React. Right? They're all going to have to import React. We won't have to import React DOM ever again. Right? That only is loaded once in the index.js, right, to bind the DOM with React, right, and then never again. Right? So all components are going to need at least the React.js library. Then under here, we're going to just create a function. We say const called course manager component. It's going to be a function that renders as h1 course manager. Okay, and we're going to export. So export allows us to declare all sorts of functions in here and variables and whatnot. Anything that I declare in this file will only exist in this file. All right? Even if somebody imports anything from here, they can only import things that I explicitly export from this file. All right? So that's how we break up the namespaces. So as I export, I can export variables and functions into a specific namespace, or the default namespace is very common. Right? So we'll export it to the default namespace. All right, so notice that this is gray. It says gray, meaning that it realizes that nobody's using your component, right? You're an orphan. So let's use it. Let's take a look. Let's go back to our top level component, right? And let's replace this. Let's replace this with course manager component. Notice that my IDE has already parsed my project, right, and realized that there was a component, right, that's being exported, right, and it's trying to pattern match as I type. That's pretty good. That's nice that the IDE gives you that kind of support. If I do an enter, notice that it automatically imports for me that component from the right file, right? So it's nice. The IDE is kind of working on your behalf here, and we can close that, and that's the HTML element that I'm returning. You can treat it as an HTML element. Everybody good? Right. So if I go back and look at how it renders my course manager. There it is. Everybody good? All right, excellent. So let's create a couple more.